It's like, I know you have a beard, but other than that, I can't tell. Well, okay, looks like that clock's ticking, so good afternoon. Hope you guys are enjoying, and gals, enjoying Build 2015. My name is Mike Morton. I'm a program manager on the Azure Tools team. We're a team inside of Visual Studio. We work on the SDK and some other things, and we'll walk through today. My plan is just to do kind of it's a 200 level session because it's kind of a high level of what's new. I'll be honest, if you went to the 5 perfect sessions, you've probably seen everything I'm going to show you today, but chances are you haven't seen them all. So likely there'll be a duplicate or two. Hopefully I can show you something new that maybe a keynote kind of brushed over or something. So I'm pretty sure you'll walk out of here learning a couple things. If nothing else, we'll probably have a couple laughs. Something to go wrong, or I'll make a joke, or you guys will make a joke. So stick around. We'll have a good time. Yeah, whatever. That's a new slide. All right, so Azure SDK. What is the Azure SDK? What are our design goals? Why do we build it? It's really about focusing on the cloud and the web developer scenarios. We want to make tools to make it easier for you all to build cloud applications, take advantage of Azure the best you can. Very customer driven, so please give us feedback every day, any day. Have a link here to go up to our feedback site. We ship our tools often, typically, as you probably know, about every 4 months or so. Sometimes it's 3 months, so every 3 to 4 months we're shipping a new Azure SDK. As you've probably heard, the Azure SDK 2.6 is available. Just yesterday, I believe. We provide side-by-side, so if you're running a 2.2 or even a 2.5, we do support side-by-side. So not everyone knows that. You don't have to uninstall the old one, reinstall a new one. You can run those side-by-side as needed. And typically we support the current version of Visual Studio and then one version back. We're kind of in an odd state because we have this new version, Visual Studio 2015 RC that was just released. And we do have an SDK that's supported on that version also. So right now we have 3 different ones for you to choose from. And if you went up to the the web platform installer, you would see that you can install any one of those 3. So it's available today. Go on up to the web platform installer and install the one that matches the Visual Studio version you're running. In fact, how many people are running 2.6? Show of hands. Anybody installed 2.6 yet? I see like a handful. What are people running? Quick show of hands. 2.5? Who's running 2.5? SDK 2.5, okay. And older than 2.5, I won't pick on you. 2.4, 3, or 2? A few. Anybody on the 1 dot still? Good answer, good answer. As you know, we do have a support life cycle, so keep an eye on that. We support quite a few, but I'll be honest, we're trying to tighten that up a little bit, so don't get too far behind. All right, I have maybe a half dozen, maybe 8 slides. I'm gonna go through the first 3, and then I'm gonna jump into demos. And then I'll probably just, unless you guys have a problem with it, probably just go through all my demos. And then if we have time, I'll jump back and we can recap on a couple slides if we have time. But I think everybody would rather see product bits than slides. A lot of nods, okay? So today we'll go over 6 or 7 things. Real quick, like 2-minute thing on app service. I'm not gonna get into details. We'll talk about connected services, diagnostics, and you can read the rest of those bullets. So let's just get on to the slides here. Come on, you can go, there we go. So first is the Azure App Service. It was actually announced a few weeks ago, maybe even 3 or 4 weeks ago. We actually had an SDK that was the 2.5.1 release. Did anybody install 2.5.1? A couple people, okay. So have you guys played with App Service at all? Okay. 2.6 has some improvements on the App Service. Again, I won't go into a lot of details because there's a number of sessions here. I have some links in my deck to some sessions, one that's already gone and one that's tomorrow, I think. This isn't an area that I'm deep in, I'll just be honest, but it's pretty cool. They're offering this integrated new offering. Basically, your things that were app sites before are now, or websites are now web apps, but we also have mobile apps and API apps, and these new things called logic apps. And the top 3, the web apps, the mobile apps, logic apps, they kind of all build on those API apps. So definitely something to check out. It allows you to scale all of these together. I think actually it's gonna save you some money if you're using the miscellaneous pieces today, like websites and mobile services. Bringing these together actually gives you some consolidated savings. Excuse me. They've also offered, with the logic apps, they have some really cool connectors to a lot of the SaaS systems that you may use or your customers may use. The logic apps are pretty neat. If you haven't seen them, there's a great demo. You go up to the portal and you can drag and drop these like mini blades onto there and configure them. It's pretty awesome. Think about like a workflow that's up in the cloud. So check those out. That's about all the detail we'll go into today. Connected services. So this is something, we redid connected services in Visual Studio 2015. We actually released it in the preview back in the fall, and we have a few updates to it. The main update is we added App Insights as a service that you can add. And what connected services does is, say you have a web app or any type of app, and you want to leverage one of your Azure resources, this makes it really easy to just point at a resource, and we'll bring down the configuration and help configure it for you. We'll go get the NuGet package that you may need to use that, like the storage, for example. So this is really easy. It really helps get you started quickly to leverage your services in your application. One other thing that we're offering now is we have an SDK. So if folks in here have their own service that maybe isn't up on Azure, but somewhere else, like Salesforce. Salesforce has a connector that they've put into connected services. If other people have a service that they'd like to bring in, we now have an SDK that you all can leverage and get your own type of resources into the Visual Studio Connected Services experience. And then diagnostics. We'll go in a little depth here. We have some nice changes here that I think people are going to really like. As you know, diagnosing your cloud apps and your IaaS apps once they're deployed, it's a challenge. You can't just hook up a debugger and see what's going on. So creating events and using logs is critical, and using the Windows Azure Diagnostics is what makes that fairly easy to do. So we now support diagnostics when you F5 in the emulator, so you can try out all of your event sources and your trace write events and stuff that you're doing. In the past, that wasn't supported, so that's a really nice thing, and I'll show you how that works. And you no longer have to try to read your logs in that little small window inside of Visual Studio. You can now easily export those out to a CSV file and open them up in Excel or any other viewer that you want that handles CSVs. And then we improve the viewer a little bit, and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, let's jump into a demo here. All right, so here we are in, I'm actually going to flip back and forth. This is Visual Studio 2013. I'll do a couple demos in each just to show you our SDK. For the most part, our SDK supports both versions just as well. There are a few new things towards the end that I'll show you that are only supported in 2015, so I'll point those out when we get to them. All right, so first, here we have an application. This is the Contoso Ads application. You can go up to azure.com and download that. It's a good learning application. It's got a worker role and a web role. The web role writes to a database. You get a little UI. You can put in an ad and a picture. So it gets written to the database. The picture gets written to blob storage, and then we actually write a small queue message just to wake up the worker role, and the worker role grabs that and turns it into a thumbnail. So pretty typical application, but it lets you experiment with both the worker and the web roles. People using worker and web roles quite a bit. So for those of you that are not, are you guys all doing IaaS? So if you're doing either, is anyone doing something other than IaaS or web and worker, such as just websites? Just websites? So a few. Okay, it's good to get a feel for this. So this is applicable to PaaS or your worker web roles, as well as IaaS for the most part. It's not the same for websites. Websites has a little bit different diagnostic story. So I just want to make sure we set that context good. So I have an application that I described to you, and we want to make sure that we put out events both in the web and the worker roles so we can figure out what's going well, what's going not so well. So what I've done here is here's the web roles configuration. One thing that we've brought back, if we've made it easy for you, up here is where you can pick your different configurations. So I have a local configuration, and you'll see here that now I can use my local dev storage so that when I hit F5 in the emulator, all of my event logs, Windows Azure Diagnostics, is going to pump those out to my local dev storage. Whereas when I'm in my cloud configuration, you'll see that I'm pointing to a real storage account that's up in Azure. So that's a nice little thing that we added. And then the configuration applies to both. And if you hit the Configure tab, this is where you can set up your configuration for Windows Azure Diagnostics. This isn't necessarily new. I just want to point out so everyone knows that you can come here and you can turn on how often you want to transfer storage from the local storage on the VM into the table storage up in Azure. And you can also set the log level here. And you can do that for your application logs, your Windows event logs, such as your system application, whatever ones you want. You can also do that for perf counters. And we turn on a few by default, but you can also turn on whatever perf counters you want, as well as create your own. So is this all familiar to people? Is this just, okay, yell out faster if this is all just duplicate. You can also do your infrastructure logs. So these are the logs where Azure's actually writing messages for things where it's maybe scaling up or scaling down. Transfer any kind of logs you want, as well as ETW. And we have our crash dumps. So if you're trying to fire up a web or a worker role and you have a crash, this is where you can say, hey, any crash for these kind of processes, automatically copy those into my table storage so you can analyze those. So I've gone and set these, as you can see. The main one we'll focus on is the application log. And the events that we're going to be getting are events such as this. So here you can see, let's go to the web. Here's the web role. Here's the web role. So this is when I get a new add in. Excuse me. And you can see that we're writing out different messages. So when we write something to the database there, you can see that we're doing that. When we create a queue message, so on and so forth. Just events so that we can get that tracing information. So if something goes wrong, middle of the night, we can look at our logs and have a good idea at least, maybe not exactly why, but at least kind of where the issue is so that you can zoom into that area. And then similar on the worker role. As we're pulling messages off the queue, we're writing messages out saying, hey, we're here. We didn't find a message. We can't create a thumbnail. When it's successful, generated a thumbnail, so on and so forth. So we're just using these real simple trace events to emit these logs so that I can really know what's going on with my worker and web roles. So let's F5 that. So this is going to use our local emulator. And does it go in the services config file? It's going to go into, and I'm experiencing an issue here. Hang on one sec. We have a WAD config X file that's hanging off of each role. Is that the one you meant? Yeah. All right, the demo beast has gotten me. I think that's eventually going to finish, but we're gonna escalate it here. We're going to make that happen a little faster. And so you can see real-time diagnostics here. So when this happens, just the easiest way for me to make sure it doesn't happen the second time is we're going to shut down the emulator. So I just shut down the local emulator, and then I'll restart Visual Studio here. All right, so we'll restart Visual Studio, and we will immediately just F5 that again. Open that project back up. All right, let's see if we have a little better luck here. So we'll go ahead and F5. That was good luck. We saw the little flash for the diagnostics. That's basically configuring the diagnostics on the local emulator. So now we're starting the emulator up from scratch. This will take a couple more minutes. I was a good demoer, and I pre-warmed all this stuff for us, but then I had to shut down VS. So it's kind of like, well, do-over. So here we're starting up our website. This is our web role. Again, it's a simple ads. This is like if you have ads for your internal company, it's nothing fancy. It's not going to replace Craigslist necessarily. And we can see, let's just go ahead and create an ad. And we're going to have to start this up. All right, so let's, I have a Jeep that I wouldn't mind selling for a decent price. I don't really want to sell it, but my wife wants me to, so we'll go ahead and pick that. We'll go like that, and we'll make this quick since we had to restart stuff. I don't want to get too far behind. So we're going to go ahead and add that Jeep ad. That's going to create the database record with some of that information. It's going to put the full-size image into blob storage, and then write a really short just queue message, which will trigger the worker role. And if I refresh, here's my Jeep that I just added down here. If I refresh, we should see there's the small image right there, the thumbnail. And of course, we can edit that and change it if we wanted to. All right, I'm going to add one more, just so let's also Let's also get rid of my chopper. Life does not like it. Probably not a great description, but we'll go ahead and sell that too, and we'll create that. So now we've got a couple records there, and we should see that refresh. So there. So our worker role is grabbing that queue message, going to the blob, and then generating that message. So we'll go ahead and shut this down. And if you remember, we had our configuration set, and we were doing those trace events. So those trace events, they all go to a storage queue over here. I'm sorry, a table, actually. Let me expand that. Server Explorer. How many people are using the Azure node in Server Explorer to look at various things? Really? The rest of you don't? What do the rest of you use? What do you use? No? All right. Does everyone know about the Azure node that you can view storage and VMs and websites and stuff? Okay. So I can go here and I can look at my storage, and the first one is always your development storage. And if you look in the tables, you'll actually see a set of tables that are fairly obvious. So here's where your infrastructure logs go. Here's where those performance counters and your different event logs go. There's a couple that actually go straight to blobs, which I'm not currently outputting, but most of them come right here to your tables. And this WAD logs table, that's the one that your main activity logs are going to come to. And the best way I've found is to go and sort by precise timestamp, excuse me. And we will get our latest one up here. And then we can go over here, and you want to look at the message column. That's where the actual message that you write out is going to go. And this is going to usually take, so there, we got some uploaded files. This usually takes a minute or two for those logs. First, they get written to the role, which is running on the VM. They get written to that storage area on the VM. And then you can set how often. If you remember, I'll come back up here. I said for this web role, I set how often I want that information to be transferred from the local storage into my table storage. And for default, if we go back here, I set the default or the setting to be 1 minute. So every minute I want that transferred. Well, it's about a minute, give or take 30 seconds or so. So that's why I say it's about a 2-minute lag for that information to get into that table. In fact, if we refresh that, and you can do that with this right here, we probably have a few more that have come in. And where did my stamp go? So again, precise timestamp is usually the most accurate timestamp. And then go over and expand that message count. That's the easiest way to do that. And you can see those messages. So you can see that I've been uploading those images. We've been processing them. Earlier I had a few exceptions, and so you can see those exceptions in there. And in fact, let's do this. So this is during F5, so this is new. The emulator now supports writing out to these diagnostic logs. Great way to test to make sure that your diagnostic information is being written out correctly. But then, of course, once you're in production, I'm going to go to that cloud service. I have this deployed also. We'll expand this up. And this is my Contoso ads. There we go. That's my production one. I'll go ahead and launch that. So this is the one that's deployed up to Azure. And it came up a little behind there. So let's go ahead and create an ad up on this version of it. And let's grab an image. We'll grab we'll grab a picture of, what do we have? We have another Jeep picture. You can tell I'm going to have a Jeep guy. So we'll add one of these, and we'll put in whatever. We'll just get this quick so we don't run behind. And we'll do another car, and we'll hit create. And then I'm going to add one more. And so this one's actually, even though it's got a PNG ending, this is actually going to be, it's actually just a notepad file with some various characters. So I actually want to feed it an invalid one, because I want to show you what you can look for when these don't work. So I'm going to go create new, and I'll grab this file here, which is not a picture. And we'll just call it test, because we know it's going to fail. And I need to give it a price. We'll say it's 0, because it's in the free category. So that one, if I hit F5 here a few times, I'm going to notice that. So there's my Jeep picture that I put in here. So that one's already been processed. But this one, you'll notice, isn't going to come back. So this time, rather than go to that local storage, what we're going to go to is the way you look at that stuff. Let me close this just so it's not confusing. Close that and close that. What you do is you go down to the web or the worker role. In this case, I just know that the worker role is the place where we process that image. So what you want to do to look at that diagnostic information is you want to go down to your worker role, And you can go down to an individual instance, or in this case, I have one, so it doesn't really matter. And I can say view diagnostics data. What we're going to do is we're going to pull that down from that live running role, and you'll see that I have an application error. And my guess is this is from the one I did a few minutes ago when I was out just before we started, because this, again, takes a few minutes to come down. So I'd be surprised if it came down that fast. And you'll see, actually, let's do this. You'll see we have a new export feature. So right here, you can export to CSV. Let me go ahead and do that, and we'll save that to my desktop. So again, you don't have to view it in that small little screen. You can go ahead and create a comma-separated table or a file, and then we'll just go to the desktop and open that up. There we go. And we only have one row. I expected to see more than one row in there. Oh, no, we only had one. So we can look at that in Excel, and we can go to the message right here, open that up. Come on, open up. And we can see that we got an exception, but it's actually not the exception that we wanted. We would have to, let me see if I can go like this. So I changed that to 45 minutes, and I'm going to do refresh. There we go. So those are some of the messages I was looking for. I'm just going to look at them right here so I don't have to do that again. But you'll notice here in the worker role, what we had here is we got an invalid parameter that was sent in as argument 1. And if you look at the method that it's calling, which I just covered up with my thing there, oh, come on. There we go. You'll see that we're calling the worker role convert image, and we're passing in a stream. So this is because I gave it an invalid image to process. So what I'm trying to show you here is where to go to look at these diagnostics, because again, you can't set a live debug session when you're in production. So you need to know, A, make sure you're putting out enough event messages, whether you're using ETW or just trace events, and then knowing where to come afterwards to find those event messages so that you can figure out what's going wrong is really important. Okay, so this doesn't scale infinitely. Obviously, if you have a whole bunch of roles here, I had 2 roles, so it's pretty easy. So we've actually been working with some open source projects. Elk, are anybody using Elk, the Elk stack, which is Elasticsearch and Logstash and Kibana? So we actually have some scripts that we've created that make it really easy to stand up an Elk stack in Azure, either on a single machine or on a multi-machine, just depending on how much you need. So if you're doing maybe 5 or 6 or more roles, you might want to think about a way to process the log information and be able to look at it across all of those logs, because to go into each one and look for error messages just doesn't scale very well. So here's what one of those dashboards looks like. I'm going to refresh this. So this is live against the site that's been published to Azure. And so you can see here that I'm looking at different things. So we have a chart for available memory, so we can see how the memory is available. In this case, I'm the only user, so there's not a lot going on. We look at our CPU, and we can look at different stuff. And you can customize these Kibana dashboards however you want. And so basically what's happening here is we're taking that data out of Azure Storage, and we're using Logstash to pump it into Elasticsearch. And then we've built this dashboard in Kibana to look at certain kinds of logs that we care about, such as the error logs. So right now I'm looking at today's. If I was to, let's zoom this in. All right, and then I can actually pick a spot in here where we had 5 errors. So when I zoom into there, that should, come on, get in there. You'll see how it just went down and we zoomed into those 4 errors. And you can see the time period up here in the top right that we just zoomed into. Well, we didn't just zoom in on that one error chart. We zoomed in this whole dashboard. So you'll actually see that we zoomed in and we're only showing the messages that occurred during that time. And we can keep zooming in as far as we need to. You can go up and you can look at a bigger period. So if you want to look at, say, all the things that are going wrong this week or this month, and you can customize these Kibana dashboards immensely. This is a real simplified one compared to things we've seen. So if you're using a lot of roles or a lot of IaaS VMs, this is something you might want to look at. Again, we have the scripts that will help you set this up, and I'll have a pointer to those later in the presentation. All right, let's go back to slides real quick. Diagnostics. So any questions that are just big and that you don't want to wait for that you might get lost if we don't answer them now? We got one here. Can you add alerts? So Kibana does have a way to add alerts. The Azure infrastructure has alerts also that you can set up. So it just depends on where you want to set those. I don't know if that's part of the free Kibana. It's not a product that Microsoft sells, so I'm not going to comment on that. But the answer is yes, one way or another, you definitely can. Okay, I'm going to switch gears a little here. Azure RM. So there's been a few talks talking about the new Azure Resource Manager. When I say Azure Resource Manager, kind of think new portal. People using the new portal? Okay, some. Are people familiar with Azure Resource Manager versus kind of the old stack? Do people understand the difference there? Not exactly, okay. I'll show you some of the tooling. Bottom line is, as we move to the new portal, the resources that we're used to seeing in the old portal, those are kind of moving over. If you've noticed, the new type resources like Data Factory and the Redis cache and MySQL, I believe, those you can only go create on the new portal. You'll see more and more of that as we go. So getting familiar with the new portal and this new Azure RM stack is going to be pretty important because that is definitely the direction that Azure is moving. So to help with that, we have some tools that we've created which gives you a bunch of starting point templates, like a VM or a website with a database, and we have a number of starting points. But then we have a number of, I don't want to call them snippets because it's not like right-click insert snippet, but a number of, let's call them sub-templates that you can add to those starting point templates. And we have tools that help you navigate this big JSON file. But what's great is this JSON file, once you describe all of the resources that you want, a VM with a virtual network with a database, it's great because it's easy to repeat. You can spin up a test version, you can spin up a production version, or as many other maybe intermediary versions that you need. Actually, let's, I think there's just one slide here. One other thing that we've done is we've modified the deployment process in this Azure Resource Manager tooling that I'm going to show you, and it actually uses PowerShell. So if you want, we have a great PowerShell editing experience now in Visual Studio 2012 and 2013 and 2015, and you can edit that PowerShell however you want, so that when you publish, whether it's direct with the PowerShell or even using our deployment dialog, it's going to execute that same PowerShell, so you can customize that and take advantage of it. And I'll show you how to do that right now. Let's switch over. We don't need that. We will need this probably. Sign back in. All right, so let's close this project. It didn't switch. I'll hit it again. Thank you. Hit it a third time. There we go. 3 is lucky. Thank you. All right, close this out. Let's start a new project here. So what I'm going to do is start a new project. And you'll notice, actually, in the SDK 2.5, we actually released the starting point of this functionality. At that point, it was called a cloud deployment project. Did anybody use a cloud deployment project? Okay, so we got a couple people. We might want to talk afterwards. There's a little manual migration you may need to do. But going forward, these Azure Resource Group projects, same exact concept. We've just done some renaming and some adjustments. But we're in a much better position now, I think. So we'll go ahead and create one of those. So this is something, again, you're going to define your resources. So you may or may not do this in the same solution where you have your code. I actually like to. I like to have my code and my config right there together and get it all into source control together. I think it's a really good practice, but everyone has their own preference there. But you can see here I have a number of starting points. If I just want a simple web app, well, that's fine, we could do that. But if I wanted something a little more tough to describe, is a new virtual machine. And this is actually using the new V2 virtual machines that just came out in the last couple days. So let's go ahead and pick that. Let's say I have an application that I want to run on my virtual machine, but I also want to use Azure SQL. So I want to describe that environment so I can spin it up and take it down as much as I want, or as often as I want. So we'll pick that and we'll say, okay. This is going to create one of those Azure Resource Group projects. And those are nice and tidy. So you'll see here we have scripts and templates. Those are the main things. If we look at the templates, let me make that a little bigger. You'll see that we have a virtual machine JSON template. So this is the resource template. Ooh, let's make that a little bigger. So you'll see that the template's made up of 3 main sections. You can have parameters, you can have variables, and you can have resources, with resources being kind of the star of the show. But parameters and variables are very important, because what they allow you to do is describe those resources once, and then have a parameter file, which we give you one, which is called parameter.dev. And you can create as many of these parameter files as you want, one for dev, one for test, integration, production, whatever you need. So let's take a look at this file here. You'll also notice we gave you a nice JSON outline view over here. So if I expand this, you can see in the resources there's a storage account, and you'll see how when I click on one, we highlight the other one. So it's real nice that you can stay in sync here. We also generate a public IP address, a virtual network, a network interface card, and then of course the VM itself. So again, these are those new V2 VMs. They give you a lot more flexibility and power. So definitely take a look at these. These are kind of the new stack for VMs and compute and resources, or storage, sorry. So let's now go ahead to these resources. So we talked about wanting a VM. So this kind of describes our VM and the other pieces that we need. So what I'm going to do is I'm now going to add a new resource. And you'll see here, these are those things that I didn't want to say snippets, but they're kind of like snippets of JSON that you can include into your JSON file. And we have a lot of common JSON snippets here. If you want to put in an availability set or another public IP address, or maybe add Redis cache to your solution. But in our case, we wanted to add a SQL database. So let's go ahead and add a SQL database. We'll just call it, what are we building here? We'll call it the Jeep SQL database. Now, if I had a server that was already described in this JSON file, I could pick that server, and that's where the database would be created. Or if not, I can create a new one. So I click Create New, and now it jumps to the SQL Server, and we'll just call this our Jeep SQL Server. I'll click Add. So that's added the Jeep SQL Server to my JSON. And you'll actually see over here on the left in the JSON outline, you'll see that that's already been added. And so now I just have to click Add again to add that database. And then we'll make that a little bigger. And you'll see that here that database was added. And if we click on this, you'll see that here's where the SQL Server was added. And in fact, we also just automatically, because we thought, well, you're probably going to want to open up some of those IP ports on your server. So we included a firewall rule so you can open up any IP ports. We didn't actually specify any IPs, but this is where you'd go in and maybe open them up to your dev box or something like that. So again, this is a great way to describe your resources. So now that I've done that, I want to deploy these resources. So there's a lot of parameters. Let's go ahead and look. And you'll see all these bolded ones. When I added the SQL Server and the database, there were additional parameters that were required. So you'll see the bolded parameters are the ones that were added while I was doing this. So now we need to go to our parameter file. Come on, mouse. There we go. And you'll see, here's the parameter file that we gave you by default, but there's a bunch more parameters now that I need to add and set values. So I can do that in JSON. If I love JSON, I can do that. And we give you IntelliSense and stuff that can help you. But to be honest, when you're setting the parameters, I find it a lot easier just to come here and do deploy. And when you do that, it brings up the deployment dialog. So here is where you can specify the subscription, the Azure subscription you want to deploy to. And then here's the resource group. So all of these resources, when we deploy these are all going to get deployed to one resource group. A resource group is a new first-class concept in the new Azure RM world. If you go up to the portal, every resource that gets created now always goes into one and only one resource group. It's great for gathering all your resources for an app into one location or into one kind of container. You can do management on that container. You can easily destroy all of the resources in that resource group just by deleting the resource group. You can, eventually you'll be able to do quota management on that resource group, as well as set RBAC permission, role-based access permissions, which you can do today already. So resource groups, real key concept. So let's go ahead and create a new one. And we will call this we'll just call this the Jeep resource group. We'll just get real creative here. And I may have one, so I'm going to call it 2 just in case. Here's what we'll do. We'll use Jeep2 as our suffix for all of our stuff. And then I pick a location for that resource group. Even though it's just a container, it still exists somewhere and it has certain functionality. So it actually is a resource in itself that lives somewhere. So we'll create that real quick. And now, the template and the parameter file is already defaulted, as you can see. So there's the parameter. If I had 3 or 4 different parameter files, I'm sorry, the first one was the template. If I had 3 or 4 different parameter files for my different environments, this is where I could pick the different file when I go to deploy. But what I like to do is I click Edit here, and you'll see you get a nice dialog that comes up, and it shows you all of the parameters. And for the parameters that you haven't specified a value, this is where you can go in and plug in a value. So let's go ahead and use our Jeep2 suffix. But I've learned my lesson. There's a few of these resources that don't like uppercase characters. So some accept uppercase, some don't. So I've just learned my lesson, especially in demos where I try to get it right the first time, to go ahead and go with all lowercase. So this is our storage account. This admin name, this is the admin name for our VM, because remember we're spinning up a VM as well as a SQL Server and database. So I'm just going to give this an admin name and a password. You'll notice how it doesn't show me the characters there. If we were to go look at the parameter file, you'd notice that this parameter was specified as a secure string versus just a string. And that's what tells the tools to obfuscate it when it's being typed in. And actually, if I don't click the Save Password button here, it's not even going to save that to the file. But I will. I'll click the Save Password. And since you may end up seeing it, I'll use a password that I never use. All right. And then for our public IP, we'll just do Jeep2 public IP. This is something you do once, because once you've done this once, we'll store it in that parameter file, and then you can just execute this easily over and over without having to specify these. And I'll just whip through these and do Jeep2 server name. And again, and get ourselves in trouble. And we'll give it a location. So we're working on making this a drop-down. There's some technical details, but follow this pattern for now: West US, East US, those kind of names for your locations. Again, we need that, and then we need and how many more? We got Jeep2 database. Whew. All right, so now we have all of our passwords and all of our values. I can hit Save Passwords, and I can save that. Now, at this point, I'm going to hit Cancel here. At this point, you can see that all of my passwords are plugged in, or all of my parameter values are plugged in. So I won't have to do that again. I can do this one of 2 ways. I think most of the time, when you're getting started with this, you're going to come to this dialog, fill out the parameters like I just did, and then you're going to hit the Deploy button. It's not lit up right this minute because I have to go pick, I think I picked, didn't I create a Jeep here? Created a resource group. What did we call it, Mike? Oh, wrong resource. Oh, wrong subscription. Put it in mine, and we called it Jeep something. There we go. Jeep2 resource group. So again, I could hit deploy right here, and it would start deploying these resources. But what I want to do is I want to show you the new integration that we have with the PowerShell. So in the 2.5 release, so that for the few people that were using the deployment resource group before, we didn't give you a choice. We gave you a PowerShell file, but it was not tied to this deployment dialog. So now this deployment dialog actually fires off the PowerShell file that we supply you, which is really cool because you can go in and insert whatever else you want. It also comes with a little danger because you could break that PowerShell file and it could fail, but don't do that. So if we open up our PowerShell file, first thing I want to point out is we have great colorization. There's a extension out there for PowerShell. How many people are using the PowerShell extension? Many people? Okay, so Adam Driscoll is at MVP. He created a great extension. It's an open source project. We've invested a lot of time with Adam and other people in the community, and we've done a lot of work to give great colorization, IntelliSense. We let you set breakpoints, so I can go in here right here. I can set a breakpoint in here, and I can hit F5 basically and run this script. So we give you all of that rich editing of PowerShell right inside of Visual Studio. So you don't have to jump out to PowerShell ISC if you don't want to. If you still love ISC, we love ISC too. So just giving you options. Like I said, this is customizable, so I could come here and do a write dash, and there you'll see the IntelliSense we get. I could do a write dash output. And we can do something like hello build from PowerShell in VS and save that. So again, could have just hit deploy on the dialog, so don't get overwhelmed. If that's all you want to do and you're not into PowerShell, then ignore this part of the demo. But for those of you that do use PowerShell, maybe you want to use this PowerShell file to automate it in the future, I just want to show you that you can edit and debug this right inside of Visual Studio, and then you can take it and put it in as part of your CI, your continuous integration, or your continuous deployment. So we have a breakpoint there. I'm now just going to come here, and I'm going to say execute a script. And I'm actually going to hit cancel here because I want to scroll up. So I'm going to hit cancel, ignore any error messages. You're going to see that there's a parameter here that has to be passed in. Normally our dialog would pass this in. That's why it prompts me for that resource group location, if you were wondering. We could fix that just by typing in West US there, but we won't. You'll also see that we've hard-coded this to use Azure Resource Group. And really what we should have used, does anybody remember the resource group name? Jeep2 Resource Group? Come on, someone help me out. Jeep2 Resource Group. Let's go ahead and fill that in. Thank you for whoever was willing down there. All right, so now we have our right name. Now we're going to run that again. I can also just right-click here and say execute a script. And there, so there it's prompting us for where we want that resource group, because again, our dialog would normally pass that in. We'll do West US. And there we've hit our breakpoint. So here we are, right inside of Visual Studio, and we had a breakpoint, and we're debugging PowerShell, which if you're a PowerShell person, you'd be clapping now. So obviously there's no PowerShell people. That's fine, don't clap, no pity claps. I remember that though when I evaluate you guys. Oh, that's right, no, you evaluate me. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and hit F10 here. And you'll see if I make this output window a little bigger, you'll actually see there's my code. So that, obviously that write output could be any code that you guys need anywhere you want. We'll just keep F10 in through here, which is pretty cool. And we'll get down here pretty quickly to the main thing. So this is the main, here's the main method or the main command that matters. This is gonna say, hey, actually deploy that resource group. Those first lines of code, we're looking for things that we might need to upload into storage and yada, yada. This is gonna actually tear apart that resource JSON file and the parameter file, and it's gonna match up and go ahead and supply the parameter values. It's also gonna look for any missing parameter values. So let's say I didn't save my passwords, which actually is a best practice, by the way. If you're using a continuous integration, you don't wanna save your passwords in the file. But I did just for ease of demo here. But if I wouldn't have, right here it would have prompted me for those passwords. But because I did, I can just hit continue, and we will look in the output window here. Not that one, let's look at the output window. And we'll see that that deployment is starting up. First it goes out and it validates that template, and then it's gonna go through resource by resource and actually talk to the back end and get all of those resources spun up. And it's gonna do this, so you'll see if we wait long enough here, it's actually gonna do this and spin up as many resources at a time that it can. So to figure out the dependencies, but everything else it'll try to do in parallel. So it's pretty smart and pretty fast. I bet you in 3 or 4 minutes, we'll have a VM and a database and everything spun up and working. I actually pre-created one that looks very similar, just slightly different name. Let me sign on to the portal. Here at Microsoft, we have 2-factor auth, so I have to actually use my virtual smart card. So let me just type that in. That's probably because I have no limits on my Azure bill, so I don't know. Let's see here, if we go, I have this, I created, rather than a Jeep, I created a finance app resources. So defined it the same way, I just didn't want us to have to sit here and wait. And if I look at that, you'll see that we have a VM, a NIC, or a network interface card, a public IP, and a virtual network. And then we have our SQL database and the storage account. The storage account's needed for that VM to store stuff in storage. And if you're wondering where the server is, if you click on the database, it'll actually tell you, come on, it'll tell you, you can do it. It'll tell you where the server is as soon as it fills out these essentials here. There we go. We can see where the server is there too. So really easy to spin up resources. What's great about this is with a couple clicks, like if I was, maybe it's Friday and I'm done with this resource group for the weekend, I don't want it to run all weekend, I can just come here, I can click delete. This would destroy that whole resource group and all of the resources underneath it. Or I can just do 1 or 2 PowerShell commands and wipe out that whole resource group. Come in Monday, I can go back on Monday, and I can just redeploy this, and within minutes, I'll have my resource group and all those resources. So it's not that I don't want you to keep giving us money over the weekend, but I'm just giving you an example of how you might be able to take advantage of this. Probably gonna get in trouble for that, by the way. So, such as cloud services, yes, those are not supported quite yet. I believe they will be soon. I don't know for sure, that's the honest truth. We now have IaaS support because we've been missing IaaS support or VM support until just yesterday. So I can't give you an exact date. If you want to ping me and I can try to get more information, I'm mike.morton@microsoft.com. Feel free to send me a mail and I'll dig the best I can, but some things are just not public, as you know. So that's still running, and it should be done any minute. We're not going to wait for it, though. We're not going to wait for it. So that's our Azure Resource Manager tooling. With that outline window, I'll get right to you. With that outline window, it makes it so much easier. You get a nice starting point, use that outline window to navigate, use that outline window to add extra chunks of JSON. It's a little bit more work than going to the portal and going click, 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 click to set those resources up. But once you do it once with the JSON, it's so easy to spin it up. And it's like, I don't have to guess if I want to make a second copy. I don't have to remember the 50 clicks that I went up and did on the portal. I just submit that same JSON with different set of parameter files. So it looks like a little bit of work. Trust me, if you're going to set something up more than once, take a look at the JSON files because it's going to save you time in the long run. I think we had one question here. Sorry, something about the resource group, I apologize. Oh, billing, can you get invoice for a resource group? I believe up on the portal you can. And if you can't today, you will be able to. Let me go here. So here's that resource group. Yeah, so there's the billing. So this will show you the billing for that, all the resources in that resource group. And again, eventually you'll be able to do quota management. So if you want to say, I'm not sure how granular it's going to get, but you'll be able to specify how many things can be created in a resource group. And because I can assign role-based access control, I can say, I'm going to pick on you, this good-looking guy here in the beard, he has access to one resource group, the finance one, and this guy, who happens to have a beard also, he has access to the Jeep resource group, and that's all you can use within my subscription. So you can't go party on my subscription, but you can do whatever you want in those resource groups. And then when I have quota management that's coming in the future, you'll only be able to go so big in that resource group. So it really gives you, a lot of people today, we see them generating a bunch of, like creating 4, 5, 6 subscriptions, because that's the only way that you could control costs or track costs. So this helps a ton. So definitely look at resource groups. All right, let's go back. I think I have one last slide. What's my time like? 11 minutes. Okay. Didn't mean to hit that. Docker tooling. So my last demo, how many folks are using Docker? 0 there, 1 there, a couple. Okay, I didn't use Docker, I'm gonna be honest. I didn't use Docker until last week when my boss asked me to do this talk. And so I was like, okay, I know Docker's got a whale thing on it. I'll go look at it. No, not really. My buddy showed us our tools literally in less than an hour, and I'm now a huge Docker fan. So those folks that are leaving, they're not Docker fans, obviously, I'm just kidding. But I didn't see the appeal of it at first, but now it's like, holy moly, our tools make it so easy. And how fast you can spin up one of these Docker containers, which I'll do my best to describe, I've really been impressed, honestly. I'm a convert. This tooling is not built into our SDK. It's actually a separate kind of in preview, separate install that you just go out to the VS Gallery. I will say this is one of those tools that only works on VS 2015. So install 2015 RC, put it on a VM. There's VMs up in Azure that if you have an MS-DIN subscription, you can spin up and use your credits. So however you want, install the Docker extension and play with it. It's pretty cool. What these Docker images do, or these Docker containers, they are separate concepts. So I'll talk about those a little bit. The image is kind of the description of what you want this container to look like. The container is the instance. The image is kind of like the class, if you think about it like object-oriented. So the image is the class, and you can spin up multiple instances of that Docker image. And it's really great because I can hand you a Docker image or you a Docker image, and it's gonna run just like it ran on mine. That Docker image isn't a full VM, it's just a subset of the dependencies that you need and your application code. And our tools make it super easy to do. So let's actually just switch over. I'll show you our tools. There's some great videos that go into even more depth, which is where I learned a lot about this. And I would really suggest try it out. Right now, we support Linux VMs and only the ASP.NET 5, the new ASP.NET stuff. But my guess, without committing to anything, is you'll see us have a lot more support as time goes. So let's real quick, since we are running out of time, this should work in that. I'm going to say new project. And here I'm going to go ASP.NET again. And let's go ahead and call this the Mike's Docker Build Demo app. Wow, could have been longer, right? All right, so again, as of right now, we support just the ASP.NET 5 website, or actually you can also spin up a command line project also in there. So we're gonna go ahead and pick website. Now, if you were at the keynote, you saw a quick version of them deploying to a Docker image. What I want to show you is how we created that Linux machine with that Docker extension. So on a Linux machine, you can install this Docker extension. It's going to help you do the communication. It's going to generate a bunch of certificates for you and get your environment all set up. And at first I was like, wow, that seems like a lot of work. But we make it super easy, and I'll show you that. So here we have an ASP.NET 5 project. Let's just go to the, just so we know it's ours, let's go to the About screen. And we'll just put something in here. That keyboard is not behaving very well. So we'll just do something like hello from Build and Beards. So you know I couldn't have done that ahead of time. So we'll do that, and then we'll just go up and we will publish this. So I'm gonna go publish. Now the first time, so I'm gonna choose this new option. You can see here we have this new option to do Docker containers, so we're gonna choose that. And we'll go ahead and click Docker containers. Now, I do have 3 or 4 that I've created ahead of time, and I'll actually deploy to that so we don't have to wait. But before I deploy to this Mike's Docker VM, I wanna show you how I created that. So I went here to new, and all I did was plug in the name, Mike's Docker VM. I chose the image that I wanted, and like I said, today, just today, we support these 2 Ubuntu images. My guess is this is gonna increase. And as you know, we've announced Windows Docker containers, so I would imagine someday we'll support those too. You can choose the size that you want. Again, I need to put in a server name and a password. I'm not going to finish because I'm not going to click OK here. And what I want to show you is the first time I came in here, I took a picture of it actually just to show you. This is what that dialog looked like the first time that I deployed. So it's got my name, the name of the Docker image or the VM, and you'll see that it's got this server port. That's the port that this machine here, running the Docker client, is going to talk to the Docker machine or the Docker backend. They call it Docker daemon, and we're going to send commands between there on that port. And you'll see that these certificates down here, these aren't filled in, and we have the auto-generate. This is where a whole bunch of magic happens. That Docker extension gets installed on the Linux machine, generates all these certificates, brings those down to the client, and allows you to do secure communications between the Docker client here and my Docker Linux server up in the cloud. So I'm going to go back to VS. I just wanted to show you what it would have looked like that first time. I'm not going to click OK here. Actually, I will. Hang on here. Just for fun. Just so you know I'm not lying to you. I'll have to call this probably like 5 because I've done this a few times. And I'm not going to auto-generate. I'm going to use those same certificates that I have already. And that's not lighting up because I need to pick a location, West US. OK, we'll go ahead and kick that off. So message pretty much says, hey, we're going to create a VM for you and put the extensions on it. Come back in a few minutes. And you'll see down here that we're doing exactly that. The messages are rolling out. So let's say we wait maybe 7, 8 minutes. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to spin up the Linux machine. Takes 3 or 4 minutes to apply the extension and generate the certificates. 7 minutes goes by, I come back here and I say, okay, now I want to publish my web app to that Linux VM with the extension that I just created. So I come through here. I'm going to pick this one, but in like 2 or 3 minutes, you're going to see VM5 come in this list. But this one I have is up. It's the exact same thing I did. I'm going to click OK. And you can see all it is saying, hey, talk TCP to this guy here. And this is the image name that we're going to use. The Docker file describes what that image is going to be made up of. You don't need to supply one because we'll auto-generate one that basically just has ASP.NET and your application on it. And so we'll do the basic. If you want to customize one, you can plug it in and customize it all you want. And as well, you can customize the advanced communication options here, which, by the way, I'm going to grab these because we're going to need those in just a sec. I'm going to grab that because that's how we talk, again, from the client to the server. And I'm going to validate the connection. So this is just saying the Docker client can talk to that server, and I'm going to publish. I'm running out of time, so gotta go. So you'll see we're building this ASP.NET 5 application. We're going out and resolving a bunch of the NuGet packages. We're going to build that, the output libraries, and then we're going to start talking to Docker over that port and send in not only the application, but a few other various things. We're going to send a couple commands that we want to build an image. Remember, the image is like the class, and then it will spin up a container from that image, which is like the instance of a class. And hopefully, that will end momentarily. And then our website will be deployed in this Docker image up on this VM. And I can spin up a ton of these little lightweight Docker images on that one VM. Super fast to spin them up, super fast to tear them down. They're all in a mostly isolated environment. And then we're going to launch the website, and there we are in our Docker VM. We're up there running that website, Docker VM Cloud@.net. And to prove that to you, we will connect to that Linux VM. Just open up a plain old command prompt. And remember that connection string that I copied? I'm just going to paste that in. It's saying run Docker, and I'm using TLS security protocol, and I'm connecting to the Docker VM, and then I will run a Docker command, which is PS to see the running. This shows you what? The running containers. So that's the container we just spun up. And you can see that because it's been running for about a minute. And that is our application. That's the web app that you saw when we went to that URL. I can also look at the images if I do a similar command. So remember, the images are like the class sitting there. The container is the instance. If I look at my images, you'll see actually 2 images. The reason for that is my image, which is this one. If you looked at the Docker file, it had a dependency and said, start from a base image, which is called this. And so the first time I deployed, it actually took about 4 or 5 minutes because it had to copy down that. How big is that? I saw it there. It had to copy down 850 megs from Docker Hub one time because it needed that base image. And then it applied my application and its dependencies on top of that and built another image. And each image is independent, so you don't go and you don't update images, you create new images. But once you have that base image, it's really fast. As you saw, it took maybe a minute, minute and a half tops. You can stop those images, you can start them. Again, I could go and I could publish a second image up there. It's really powerful. I'm really getting excited about this Docker stuff, and I'd suggest give it a try and see how it fits for your environment. All right, and with that, we're down to about a minute. And we have, what do we have? We did that. All right, so just to wrap up, have some resources here. I won't change off of this. Excuse me. There were a couple sessions that I referred to that actually happened beforehand, so I noted the recordings that you might want to go watch. One was getting really even deeper into diagnostics. For those of you leaving, if you could give a review, I'd appreciate it. So everyone, if you could fill out an evaluation or a review, I'd appreciate it. But take a look at some of these classes. The Azure, there's one more coming up tomorrow, well, the top one there, for Azure API apps. So that might be something if you're interested in that new app service stuff. We didn't get a chance to show you the connected services. I did want to show you that. There was one other thing I wanted to point, so I'm going to leave this up. And we have heard, how many people have more than one email account that they sign into Azure with? Okay, and obviously, probably all of you have multiple subscriptions. I want to show you something, make sure that everyone's aware of. And here, this is in VS 2015, where we support multiple accounts. In VS 2013, We still support a flavor of this, but does everyone know that you can come here and right-click on the Azure node? That's my fault. That wasn't the screen fault. I'm going to do it again. So here we are in the Azure node. Right-click, manage and filter subscriptions. If you're not aware of that, this can be really handy, because if you have multiple accounts in VS 2015, you can sign on with multiple accounts now. But even if you have a single account and you got a bunch of subscriptions, you can filter. So I can say, well, maybe I only want my work account, so I don't want my live account. And now you'll see the subscriptions went down. And then I can come here and filter out my buddy's subscription, because I don't want to see that. I can even go down to the region and only find resources for that region. So if you're not familiar with this, I just wanted to make sure that people know how to get to it, because this can really be handy, especially in VS 2015, where we support multiple accounts. And with that, I'll wrap up. I'll hang around, take any questions afterwards. Thanks a lot. Hopefully I helped you find a good nugget that you can go and use. Install the Azure SDK 2.6, install VS 2015 RC, and at least give it a try. I think you'll like a lot of the cool things we've done there. Thanks, and fill out an evaluation.